there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and it's time for the top 10 games of Reiner Knizia. Well, not of all time. You'd have to do a top 100. Oh wait, we already did. This is top 10 Knizia games of this year. That's right, the top 10 Reiner Knizia games of 2023. The man is not only a genius, but he's prolific as well. So I just thought it would be fun to do this because there's not many designers you can do a top 10 of that year for. So let's just go ahead and get started. At number 10 is a roll and write game called At the Office. And while it is a relatively standard roll and write game, it's hard to iterate too much, I think, in roll and write games. This one has a very nice, relaxing flow where you are trying to kind of arrange employees in an office hierarchy, okay? And oddly enough, it feels relatively thematic for what you're trying to do. You're trying to make sure that the people that are training employees actually have more experience than the people that they're training, things along those lines. And I think anybody who's worked in an office knows that that's not always the case. It's not always the case that the person that's training you has more experience than you do. So little things like that make it fun, but it's still a roll and write game, doesn't have a whole lot of decision space. So that's why it's my number 10 at the office. My number 9 is Ninja Master, a dexterity speed game from Itten Games, Japanese publisher. This was part of a series of games that this publisher brought to the not just to the United States, but to English-speaking parts of the world, called the Fun Brick series, and they're these small games. Ninja Master, as I said, is a kind of a dexterity speed game where you have a little area that is kind of blocked off in the center of the table and you are rolling dice. And it's a real-time speed game where you are trying to quickly evaluate what dice are on the board and do things accordingly. You've got somebody who's holding a shuriken in front of them, somebody who's holding a sword, and they have it in front, and sometimes you want to grab the sword. You want to be the first person to say out loud how many ninja are on the dice. It is absolute and utter chaos, and it will not work for every group. Tom absolutely hates the game, but I think it's great for what it is, which is a silly speed dexterity game. And I don't even tend to like these games very much, but Ninja Master is one that I will come back and play again. Number 8 is part of a series of games called 4-1. There are 4 solitaire-only games that Reiner Knizia put out this year, and my favorite of the 4 is Galactics, and that's why it's my number 8. And this is a game where you are rolling dice and you're trying to move spaceships up a number of tracks. The base game itself, the initial kind of teach game, is very simple, but the game comes with a book of challenges that lead you through 20 different challenges, and as these things progress, a lot more is added to the game that really kind of up the decision space and up the complexity. And so it's a really, really solid solo game and a great game from Knizia as well. My number 7 is Pollen. Now, I am putting this down as a 2023 game, although it is essentially a re-implementation of Samurai the card game. The reason why I'm making it a valid choice on this list is A, it's my list, and B, you don't hear a whole lot about Samurai the card game. It kind of faded into obscurity right away, and it's a shame that faded away, but I'm thrilled it came back because it's a really solid game, and All Play has really spruced it up in this Pollen edition with artwork by Beth Sobel. It is a game where you are playing cards that are kind of going to be leading to a control, a majority type of a game. It can be very, very vicious, kind of mean. There is an aspect of that because it is area control, but a really solid game that I'm glad is getting back out there to a larger audience. That is Pollen. My number 6 is a follow-up to a game that was called My City, and this is My Island, okay? And so this is a game where you are placing hexagon tiles onto a board, and it's a legacy game. So as the kind of campaign progresses, you're going to be changing fundamental things, you're going to be adding things, removing things. I don't want to get into a lot of detail because that would kind of spoil things. but it is just like its predecessor, a very simple game at heart where you are flipping over a card that tells you a type of tile that everyone starts out with the same tiles, and you're placing it onto your board. And the tiles can be in different numbers. You can have single hexes and double and triple hexes and things along those lines. And you are having to work within constraints, and you're getting new scoring conditions as the game goes on. I like this one a lot. I've been playing it with my two sons, and we've had a really good time with my island. My number 5 is, and I'm going to mispronounce this, it is Reef für die Insel, German, that from what I can understand is called Ready for the Island. And this is a game that looks like a kid's game. The aesthetic and the look of it looks like a kid's game, and it is a family game, but it's not a kid's game. It's a game that has a little bit more going on, like many of Knizia's games do. But the idea behind this is that you are putting out a market of tiles, okay? You're always going to have bananas in these markets, but sometimes you're going to be adding other things like parrots that are going to be stealing those bananas from you before you can put them on your board. And every player has a player board, and what you're trying to do is score these bananas, have the highest score in these bananas, and you're doing it by auctioning. So you're having to auction for these different market of tiles that are out in the center there. And the bananas have different ripeness. They can be very ripe, overripe, not ripe yet, that type of a thing. And so you can only score when it's around that allows for that ripeness of banana to score. And you have to account for what these parrots might do, because like I said, they'll steal things, and you've also got some negative value banana tiles, some spoiled bananas. It's a really, really fun game, simple rule set, but it leads to a lot of fun around the table. All right, my number 4 is Havilandi, which is a game about hot air balloons. And essentially the way it works is that it's a board with hexes, all right, and it's kind of in a triangular type of a shape. And what you're going to do is on your turn, you're going to roll a die, and you're going to be moving a hot air balloon, which is kind of a 3D cardboard piece. You'll be moving it around the perimeter of this board. And wherever it stops, it's going to have 2 arrows that have 2 rows of these hexes that are going to be its line of sight. And you're going to be placing one of your tiles along one of these line of sight rows. And sometimes it's directly in that row, but if you also have other tiles that you've already placed in that row, you can kind of change that up a bit. You're trying to create connections and paths that are going to score you points. Really, very, very, a game that is deeper than it first appears, like, again, a lot of his games are. At first I was playing it, I'm like, okay, there's not a lot to this. You're just rolling a die, moving this thing, and putting out a tile. But the more I played it, the more I started to see some subtleties and nuances in the design. And I really enjoy this one, Havilandi. My number 3 is Sunrise Lane, which is technically a re-implementation of an earlier abstract game called Rondo, but there have been some changes, and I think pretty significant changes to Sunrise Lane. What you're doing is very simple. You're taking one of 2 actions. You're either playing a number of cards out in front of you and placing buildings onto a central board, or you are drawing cards. That's it. Drawing cards or playing cards. But within that, there's a whole lot of fun to be had. It's a fast game. You are trying to create long, uninterrupted lines of your houses. You're trying to have the highest stacked houses, because you can stack, if you play 2, 3 cards of the same color, you are able to make 2 or 3 levels of that color building out there in front of you, of your color building out there in front of you. You're going to get points every time you place, because you're putting them on kind of pip spots on the board that will range from 1 to 5, and you'll get points accordingly. There are also, at the end of the game, 4 quadrants of the board that are going to score you in different ways. So a game that you can play in 30 minutes, even at 4 players, maybe 45 at the max if players are kind of thinking a lot, but so quick, so snappy, so much fun. Sunrise Lane is great. My number 2 is a game that I hate the title of, but I really like the game and I like the production. This is Mlem. Okay, Mlem is about cat astronauts, which clearly must be called catstronauts, okay? And so what you're doing in this game is it's a push your luck die rolling game with a little bit of kind of area majority going on. And what you're doing is on your turn, you're going to be placing out one of your catstronauts into a central kind of spaceship, all right? And whoever the active player is known as the captain. So, and each of these catstronauts have particular abilities. And what you're trying to do is go as far as you can up this track to get the most points. And so at any point, if you are still kind of alive in this rocket, you can get off and try to score on a planet or on a comet, things along those lines. And there's like I said, a push your luck element to it. There's kind of special powers. There are things you can add to the game, some kind of little variants that came within the box that can change things up even more. It's a beautiful production, and I just tend to love Reiner Knizia push your luck dice games, and this is another one to add to the list. My number one is, I think, a fantastic, pure negotiation game, and I don't tend to like negotiation games, but I love Zoo Vadis. Yes, it's a reimplementation, but it's a very different reimplementation of a very old game called Quo Vadis. In Zoo Vadis, what you are trying to do is you are a particular animal. You are trying to get your animals up into the star exhibit. You cannot even be eligible to win the game if you don't have one of your animals in the star exhibit. And so it can be very, very tense, where you're getting a ton of points in other areas, but you're not going to even be able to score those points if you don't get at least one of your animals into that star exhibit. You do this through negotiating. And negotiating in and of itself as a pure mechanism can be very tough because it can just kind of go on forever. But what this game does so well is it gives you some very clear things to negotiate with. So a very cool part of the game is that every animal, every player has a very strong player power that can seem game breaking, but you can't use your own power. You use your power as a negotiation tool to other players. And so if you've got this great power that lets you kind of travel along tunnels that shoot you further up without having to go through some of those steps, if that's your power, you can use that as negotiation for other players. You can be like, look, if you'll vote with me to let me move forward over here, I promise that anytime you want to use one of these tunnels, I'll let you do it one time, okay? Things like that. You've also got these neutral pieces out there, the peacocks, that you can bribe them to help you move forward. Really, really great game, and the production is off the charts from Bitewing Games. Zoo Vadis is such a great, great game, and that's why it's my number one 2023 Reiner Knizia game. All right, well, there you go. My favorite designer, my top 10 games from this year of my favorite designer. Let's keep this spectacular, winter spectacular going.